Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing you to Marcie Stokman. She is the founder of an organization, founder and president of an organization, a movement, I should say, called Well Read Mom. And it is a book club that I actually recently joined, and I'm excited to have her on today because, as many of you know who have listened to me, I always talk about books, or I always bring on writers or authors, and it's because I love to read. And the act of reading is a way for me to relax, but also to enter into a new space and to learn new insights and to gain knowledge about myself, about the world, and about our Lord. And so it was so exciting to learn more about Well Read Mom and to find a fellow woman who also loves reading, but in a totally different scale as me. And so I'm excited just to introduce her so she can share her story, and to inspire others to just pick up a good book and see where it takes you. So without further ado, Marcie, thank you for coming on, and would love for you to share a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, Valentina. It's good to be here. I'm a mother. I'm married to Pete, and we've been married 38 years, and we have 7 children and just had our 17th grandchild.
Oh, wow.
We live in a small town in northern Minnesota.
That's awesome. So, Marcie, can you tell us what sparked your love for reading?
Oh, well, I grew up in a family with 7 children, and to get us out of the house, my mom would send us to the library. And so we went to the library almost every day in the summer, at least 4 days a week. We'd walk to the library and check out books. And one day the librarian said, "Do you kids really read these books?" Because we're here every day, and we were just kind of killing time. But I started to pick out books and read them, and that was a start.
Wow. So actually, my mom did the same thing for us. I mean, it was just my brother and I, but every summer we would go to the library and then come back each week with stacks of books. And I don't think a librarian ever asked me that question, but I'm sure they probably thought that, like, are they really reading? So, wow. So, what would you say are some of the books that have had the most impact on you?
Oh wow, at different times in life, a different book. I like to say the books find me, that that has a hand in getting the book to the person when they need it. But as far as classical literature, I think we homeschooled our children for the most part, and you read a lot when you homeschool, and so I was introduced to books that I wanted my children to read that I hadn't had a chance to read, the great epics of the ancient Greece and Rome and Aquinas and Augustine. Just so I guess being able to read the books to my children was my own education as well.
Oh, no, that's really neat. I recently had this experience before my husband and I got married. We went on this date where we went to, it's gonna sound funny. I wasn't planning to tell him the story. We went to Barnes and Noble and picked up books that we were engaged and to get married, and we picked up books we wanted to read to our future children. And just yesterday, I found that book that I had picked for our son Joseph, and I read it to him. It's like a fun children's book called Chicka Chicka Boom Boom, and it was just so sweet to just think like, wow, before you were even born, like this was the book that I picked for you, and I hope that you love it.
I
um,
can quote you that whole book, Chicka Chicka Boom Boom. Will there be enough
no,
room babies out of bed? And this
is that yes.
that's great.
Yeah. So it's just I love reading, and I'm just so I don't know. I'm just so thrilled that you started this movement. Can you tell us a little bit more what sparked that and what led you to do that?
Right. I wasn't planning on starting anything really. I just well, it kind of started like this. I was giving some talks to mothers of preschoolers about children's literature in the area where I live. And they asked if I'd come back and speak again. And they said, speak on anything you want. And so I thought, well, these are women who are interested in literature for their children. I'm curious, what are they reading? What are these mothers reading? And so I called the talk Well Read Mom. it just came to me. It was in my head. Well-read mom, and I went and spoke about the importance of reading. I did some research on it, and I think down deep I was realizing that I wasn't reading the way I used to read. It kind of got pushed by the wayside with family life and in my own life. I wasn't reading quality literature. I was reading parenting books and some Christian books, of course, my Bible. Those are all important. But I wasn't what had left my life was reading good literature. And when I gave these talks to these women, I realized not one woman was reading quality literature for her own enjoyment and relaxation and learning about humanity. No one was reading it either. And so I drove home sad each time I gave this talk. And I felt like I was telling the women, look, reading is important. And everyone agreed with that. And I mean, no one is there saying, I don't have, everyone can say, I don't have time to read, but they all underneath think it's important. And so I was sad that in our society, people feel they don't have time to read. And that was my situation too. So one day my daughter Beth called me, and she was a new mom. So this is 12 years ago. She's a new mom, and she calls me and she says, Mom, I'm done going to these mothers groups because I've been there 3 times and they're just talking about their kids, what kind of diaper to buy. And I heard this real loneliness in her voice. And she said, isn't there a place after, college or schooling where you meet with other women and talk about real questions and not just not just things for your kids? And I heard this loneliness and thought back to my own loneliness as a new mom. It was really terrible for me because we had moved to a new city when I was first married. It was just so lonely. So it brought me right back to that loneliness. And I just thought, I don't want, oh no, another generation of this loneliness. And so I thought, Beth, why don't we do something together? Why don't we read some really good books together? Because I wanted to read more, and she needed a place of meaningful belonging. And so these ideas kind of merged, or these two desires merged. I want reading more and a place of meaningful connection. And I said, Beth, let's do this for 5 years. Let's make a book list. You get some friends in your little apartment there in St. Paul. I'll get some friends in my area, or I'll at least invite people. I'll put together a 5-year book list and some questions. And I can even I'll do a little audio. I'll introduce the book. I'll study it and introduce it and send you the audio. Let's really do this. Let's help each other. And so that's how it started.
Wow. So what was the first book that you read? Like, oh, that was part of that first year?
We read the first year, well, I didn't know how to organize the books because I pulled all these books off my bookshelf because I told her I'd do a 5-year book list. And I had at least 150 books on my rug in my living room in piles. And I thought, well, how are we going to do this? Do we read, do we start and start reading through chronologically, like with the ancient epics and then books from the Middle Ages, Dante. And then I thought, well, this is going to be overwhelming. I mean, I want something that isn't too hard, but raises the bar, but doesn't crush anyone, because really we are busy and it would be maybe like asking us to run a marathon. And sometimes you need to just learn to jog around the block again. So that wasn't the right order. I didn't think chronologically was the right order at this time. And so I was reading John Paul's letter to women, and he was thanking women. Thank you, women who work. Thank you, women who are mothers. Thank you, women who are daughters and sisters and friends. And I thought, well, that's how we could do it. Let's organize these books according to the capacities of a woman, things in her life. So the first year was Year of the Daughter. Every woman's a daughter. Every woman's a mother, and if not biologically, but it's within us in our femininity to care for others and nurture others. And so we started with Year of the Daughter, and that year we read St. Augustine's Confessions, a son of the Father. We're daughters of the Father. We read Kristen Lavensdatter. We read, can't remember what all we read, but they had to do with the theme of daughter. And the next year was Year of the Mother, and then Year of the Worker, Year of the Pilgrim. We've done Year of the Contemplative, and this year is Year of the Seeker. So this is our 12th year.
Can you tell us about this year then and how that theme was chosen of Seeker?
Yeah, so we have a little team of us who chooses the theme and starts the book list, kind of some ideas, generates some ideas for kind of framing the year, it tries to find a quote. And this year our quote is by Mother Teresa from the moment a woman has the grace to know God, she must seek. So it's about seeking, and in all kinds of ways, seeking the Lord, seeking to live the meaning of our life, seeking to grow in relationships, seeking to love. Where do we get lost? How do we find the path again? It's all kinds of seeking.
Yeah. And actually, I know as part of the well-read mom process or group, you are very not only selective, but you don't share the book list for the whole year, which is good, because I remember when I first learned about it, I'm like, oh, what are the books on the list? But it intrigued me enough to want to sign up to learn what they were. And I will say the very first book, I won't say the name, for the Year of the Seeker, or is it okay?
Oh, sure. Yeah,
Oh,
that's
okay. Caris in the World of Wonders. Oh my gosh, I could not put that book down. Like,
Isn't that book good?
it is so good. She writes so well. Like, in terms of I mean, she's a poet, but also a wonderful fiction writer, like, and melds the two beautifully. I was just in awe. Like, I felt like I could just see all the images in my mind, and so good. So whoever chose
Yeah,
that book, great choice.
I know. Well, it's such a process to choose these books, because after this is our 12th year. So the books that Beth and I read together initially, some of them we are repeating. Like we just read Kristen Lavensdatter again, because the great world classics, we want to, you can read, that's the thing about a classic. You can read it again and again. But this book, Caris, is encouraging because it's a living author.
Yeah.
And so to choose a living author, you really want to know that it's worthy. And so we were able to look at that book that was recommended by several people and read it. And I was so blessed, because it's encouraging to think that someone today is writing a book that what flows out of her is a Christian worldview, right? She thinks in terms of who she is as a daughter of the Lord. So I loved it too. I'm glad you liked it. I hope you like the next one, because it's quite a bit different.
Yes, I started it because I once I finished Karis, I'm like, oh, I gotta get on start the next one just so I have enough time. And I was like, oh, this is very different.
It's very different. I know. I agree. We're reading Dracula, so I've never read it, but
I'd never read it either.
I read Frankenstein with Well Read Mom, and I was so surprised, because Frankenstein, I'm not one to choose these kind of gothic sort of
Okay.
books. I wouldn't pick them on my own, but what I found with Frankenstein was I learned so much about it, not while I was reading it, but afterwards. I understood you can't step over God's law. And Victor Frankenstein did that, and then he became a slave to his creation, the monster. Anyway,
Yeah.
it's interesting what you can learn as you read a classic. So
Yeah. Yeah, I keep telling myself, like, this was chosen for a reason. Like, keep going,
right,
you
keep
can do
going.
this.
I know. Do you have the Ignatius Press edition? Because that has some
Yes.
beautiful essays in the front that put it in perspective, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And also our companion.
Yes, actually I have that right here with me. So
Yes.
um So one thing that you talked about earlier that I want to just go back to was that when your daughter was expressing this desire to be with other women to discuss life's important questions, and you just heard that loneliness just sort of permeating or just coming out through her what she was sharing. I think that is very real for not only stay-at-home moms or but just throughout our culture as a whole. Like we are becoming more and more isolated. Can you speak to more of how reading in community can help solve that or be one solution to addressing that?
Well, I think you're right, Valentina. We are increasingly isolated. And when I was a new mom and experienced this loneliness like Beth was having, I was staying at home for the first time. I would eventually go back and work part-time, but I was just shocked. We moved to a new city. I didn't know anyone with a baby. My son had colic. He was crying all day. I couldn't comfort him. I'm just in this little apartment all day trying to go for walks, and I honestly thought I was going to go crazy if someone didn't, if I just did, I needed friends so badly. And, you can talk to people at the grocery store a little bit, but, and at church, sometimes people come and they leave, and it's hard to know how to fit in or how to be in community. And then we did a mission trip to Guatemala, Pete and I, and Jim was there. And I remember just watching these women in Guatemala, and they had a kind of poverty that I didn't have. Like they did their laundry in the lake, and different things that, seemed hard, but they did it together. And I'd watch them I'd stand on this hill. This one time I stood on this hill watching the women in their lake, scrubbing their clothes. They had babies on their back, they had kids playing, and it just hit me. I was so jealous. I thought, I want to do that. I'll give my Maytag up and have friends.
Yeah.
I don't have anyone to share life with. This is my poverty, and this poverty of community. And so I think you're right. It's a problem in America. I think it's worse since COVID, and sometimes we're afraid of each other. And so when we started Well-Read Mom and this thing started to grow, other people wanted to jump on. I think the first year I had 22 in my group, and then Beth had 12 maybe, and another woman started. And by the end of the first year, there were 25 groups, and now there's over 1,000 groups. But what I realized was that it's good to meet in person, and it's really important. So we like to meet in person. Some people follow on their own. Some people have a group on Zoom, but our preference, or what we try and encourage, is meeting in person, because face-to-face communication is humanizing, and you read facial expressions, and the conversation meanders, and pretty soon you're all laughing, or you talk about something that you are surprised you're talking about. Like when we read Tenet of Wildfell Hall last year, there was a woman in my group who just began weeping, and she had found out that week that two of her friends from college or whatever were getting divorced, and she said, I just wish as a culture we could honor marriage like they did in this time period. Like why as a culture don't we fight for marriage? And anyway, then we were able to talk about that, how reading this book helped strengthen a conviction about marriage. And so anyway, conversations meander, and I forgot what the question was you asked me. I'm sorry.
About loneliness and how reading together and being
Right.
together makes a difference.
So all of a sudden we're crying together, and this kind of thing, not that you have to cry together, but it becomes a place for a catalyst for friendship. And when you've read a book together, you have something to talk about. You have a starting point. And so it's not like a marriage class or a class on, a virtue, growing in the virtue of, it's not a kind of class, but these kind of things happen in a grassroots kind of way, because I think of so many women who've grown closer to the Lord, or are grown in their faith, or become Catholic even, because they are around these women and they think, but these women love the Lord. And, it's just a place to meet one another. In my group, I have a woman who I don't know if she's Christian at all. I have Protestant women, and I love it because where else would we get to have beautiful conversations? So
Uh,
it opens the door for meeting people in your community.
yes. And actually, gosh, everything you said I resonated with. We recently moved to Florida. It's been about a year and a half now, but to me, it's still very recent. And so I'm still forming a community, and being a new mom, and the same pangs of loneliness will hit, even though I have such a supportive husband. It is a complete change of life and change of pace. And so, yeah, so when I learned about this Walmart mom that was starting, I was like, oh my gosh, this is an answer to prayer, because I do a lot through Zoom, which is good, but like you said,
Right.
nothing beats face to face. And so I unfortunately missed our first meeting because I was out of town, but I am so excited for our next one in a couple of weeks, where I get to meet with the ladies in person, and just, yeah, to talk and to share and to see what happens in terms of what we discuss. And so,
Well,
yes,
Valentina, you need to tell those women hi from me, and let me know how it goes.
I will. I will send them a copy of this recording. One thing I also wanted to talk about is, in a recent blog post, I think that actually came out yesterday, you mentioned the importance of self-care, and how as women we may tend to look at self-care as selfish potentially, and that we'll only take care of ourselves if we've taken care of other people and their needs are first met. And when I think about exploring our hobbies or making time to read or whatever it may be, we may push that aside to say, well, that's not important. Like, I don't need to spend time. I need to like cook or clean or write this email or do whatever I need to do for others. Why is that not a good idea?
Well, because we're human, so we're made for God, right? And so Pope John Paul talks about women will play a part in solving the serious problems of the future. And the first problem he lists that, do you know what the first problem he lists that women will help solve in his letter to women? It really surprised me. I wouldn't have ever thought of it. But the first serious problem women will help solve is leisure time. And
Really?
I just remember thinking, how is leisure time even a problem? But I was equating leisure with entertainment. And sometimes I think as women, we don't understand, we don't differentiate what is true leisure that restores us, that fills us, that is good for its own sake, right? And we attempt to run from our lives, to escape, to go online, to scroll on social media, or find ways to kind of fill the hole. But the Lord gives us, keep holy the Sabbath. The Lord, there's leisure that can be built into our days, like the Sabbath or going to Mass is true leisure, because you're there for its own sake, right? To worship God, and you remember who you are. So I'm going all over the place. Let's see, back to the question. Why do women need self-care? Because we're human. And so my husband used to say, it's easy to just, like, your kids take over. We have 7 kids are in different sports, you're running them all over. And I just remember one day I was driving in my 12-passenger van alone. I don't know how it happened, but I was driving alone to my son John's cross country meet. And it was 40 minutes. And I'm driving, and I'm thinking to myself, maybe I said it out loud. I just said, I am absolutely exhausted. I can't keep going like this. And no one in this family seems to understand or even see it. I kind of feel invisible with my needs. And I'm having that thought. And then I stopped at this Caribou coffee shop and ordered this large coffee. And I needed to get going for John's race. And I just sat down and stared at the wall. And I remember thinking, if I don't get up right now and get in that van, I'm going to miss his race. And I just sat there and stared at the wall. And I did miss his race. But what I understood was something was wrong. Something was wrong in my life. And I called a friend and I told her, she's from another country. And I told her, I said, I just stared at the wall. What's wrong with me? And she said, you American women, you think being a mom is running to everything your kids are in. She said these words now that would change my life. And she said, take care of your heart. That's how you mother. And so that sent me on a quest, like, what is it to take care of my heart? And what does that have to do with being a mom? Like, for some reason, I couldn't see the connection. It's something rang true with it, but I couldn't quite see. Because you think that being a mom involves all the physical care, and it does. And, looking out for your kids, whatever, being interested in their things, helping them, and it does. But when we forget about taking care of our own heart, like some of the conversations I've been able to have with my children have come from my own self-care, right? Because the growing as a person now, the conversations I'm having now with my adult kids comes from the growth I did, the steps I took, the decisions I made, the seeds that were planted years ago. So it matters, not just now, but it matters for the future that we take care of our heart. So reading is a way to take care of our heart. And also it's a way, when you share literature and you're in community, you just discover more about who you are, about the story we're part of. Like when you read a book, things come to the surface. Like, why are we really here? What are we doing on this earth? Is it really to send more emails and to, be busy and check off boxes?
I hope not.
No, but it's easy to forget, right? In the day to day So anyway, it brings us back. Taking care of our heart kind of centers us, reminds us who we are, moves us toward what's good and true and beautiful.
Yeah. And no, thank you for sharing that. And in that article, and actually it was an excerpt from your book, which I'd love to hear a little bit more about. You say everyone needs to flourish in the family. A mother is part of the family and needs to flourish too. And I know those are such simple words, but when I read that, it really struck me. Like, because I'm very much a doer, and to make time for leisure, it's very hard for me to just do that. And so, yeah, it was just a good reminder, like, oh wait, for me to love well, for me to love our son well, for me to love my husband well, like I have to feed my soul. I have to take care of my heart, and I have to flourish too. And it's not a selfish thing, it's necessary. So I just want to thank you for writing that because it helped me just reframe things. So
Right. I think sometimes I say to my kids, moms are people too. Like, why do we forget this? I need quiet time and I need to pray.
yeah,
And
or I need to take a shower. Okay.
right. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So you've touched on this a little bit, but I'd love to just go a little bit deeper as to why is it important for women or people in general to not just read a lot, but to read well, like to read good literature. And how would you define good literature?
Wow, that's a good question. I'm learning all this myself. I'm an amateur. I'm not a literature major. I'm a nurse practitioner by profession. But read well. So our tagline for Well-Read Mom is read more, read well. And culturally, reading is changing, right? And it's another distinction, just like we have to make the distinction between what is leisure and what is entertainment. Because I'm going back to the last question. In order to take care of our heart, we need to be sort of relentless to eliminate things that don't feed us. And that's hard. It's hard to shut off TV at night, or it's hard to not get on your phone or put your phone in another room and sit there with a book. It's not easy to do things that actually do nourish your heart. It's easier to float downstream with the culture, right? Than to paddle together upstream. That's why we need each other. That's why we need to stay together in the body of Christ. And in these little well-read mom groups, we accompany one another to do this hard thing of reading more and reading well. So what is it to read well? There's two parts to that. So read well. Well, the definition of reading culturally is changing, and maybe not officially, but the way we read has changed. And so we are now reading for information online. It's fast, it's scrolling, you're looking for keywords, information's coming at you nonstop. It's endless, feels endless. And so you've got to read quickly and make decisions, and it's very different. That kind of digital reading, scanning and skimming or clicking or making decisions about, do I click here, is a different part of the brain that's accessed than when we pick up a book. There's no mouse, there's no links, we're not going anywhere. We're going where the author takes us. And we sit down with that book and we have to fight. I have to fight because of the way I've been impacted by technology. I think it's common to all of us. We have to fight to have our attention on the book because our attention's not as good as it used to be. And we need to work to have this disciplined, focused attention that it takes to read well. So part of reading well is learning to read deeply, deep reading versus digital reading. So we need to be biliterate. We're going to do digital reading, but we need to maintain the ability to deep read, which takes continual practice. And it accesses a part of our brain that, I don't know how to say the brain language, but that accesses, critical thinking and analysis. And, it gives you space to pause or go back and reread, which I know you can do that online, but most of the time we don't read the same way. So a book, sitting down with a novel, takes you on a journey. And so to read well, you asked a question about reading well. So reading well, when I'm talking about reading well, at least in Well-Read Mom, I'm talking about great and worthy books. So books that cause these questions about life and the meaning of life to surface. So sometimes people say, well, I'm just going to read the Bible. Well, the Bible is the word of God. It's like nothing compares. I love the Bible. I read it every day. But we can also read literature that helps us see maybe something going on in our life, because through story and through a book, you get to see this whole sequence of the story, which usually in our day-to-day life, we don't see how things play out. We don't see the consequences of adultery, for example. But in Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy, you see it, and your imagination is engaged in how that plays out. After I read Anna Karenina, I understood so much more about my desire to, well, first of all, my desire and empathy for people who struggle in different ways. That exploded, but also my desire to work on my marriage in new ways, to guard it, and that also was helped. So it's kind of surprising how different books help you. It'll be interesting to see, Valentina, how Dracula helps anybody. I'm curious myself. Oh boy.
But actually, speaking of what you just said, with Karis, it actually, my husband doesn't know this, but it actually helped our marriage, because the way that she speaks about her husband, the way that, especially after she gave birth, like it reminded me, and how they met and how they fell in love. It like reminded me of how he and I met and how we fell in love, and it just I don't know, it made me fall in love with them all over again. And I was like, wow, this book did that. So yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with you.
Yeah, it brings up things from the past that you haven't thought about in years,
Mhm,
and you
mhm.
have a chance either to, like when we read East of Eden, there were women who said, I can't read this. It's too troubling for me. And of course, I would say, I think our whole team would say, fine, really, because we only have one rule in Well Read Mom, and I think it's a good one. If you don't get the book read, don't apologize. I mean, you have a life to live. You have a vocation, right? Sometimes people are sick, sometimes it doesn't work. But having said that, and having that rule, women still come and they're in this environment where they leave desiring to read more and get back to it. And also, if you're in a group and people aren't reading the book, that's not satisfying for anyone. So we do want to take it seriously, but it's kind of this both and, take it seriously and give yourself the space. There are times in life that you're not going to be reading anything, and you just have to get through. So, but sorry.
No, that's okay. And actually, we're narrating closing time. It's not the right word. As we're getting to time, this is a good transition. Can you share a little bit about the upcoming conference and then a little bit about your book? I really would love for you to share about that.
Okay. Well, we have a conference in Denver. I think it's Saturday, November 11th, or is that 12th? Anyway, one of those. And it's called She Must Seek. So it's about seeking God, and of course, through literature mostly. We have Father John Nipple's going to be with us, and we'll talk about the moral imagination. And I think my talk is called Cultural Renewal Begins with You. So it's about renewing the culture. And that I do think reading great and worthy books together plays a part in that. And it also plays a part in more and more women who read. And I do believe women are culture builders. I think it's fundamental. We're the heart of the home, and therefore that goes out into the culture. So when women read more, everybody reads more. It's just the way it is. My husband reads the books. My son listens to them while he rides his bike. I mean, there's a ripple effect when women read more. And so at the conference, we're just going to encourage that and learn more about the moral imagination, learn more about seeking, get to know each other, and have a lot of fun in the process. And then my book, I wrote it a couple of years ago, just to kind of this first book. I'm working on another one right now, but this first book is just the Well-Read Mom, and it's the story. I wanted to get down the story and the beginnings of this because clearly it's really God's work. It's been something I get to be part of. I'm grateful for that. It's really God's work because it's so beyond what's happening is so beyond me or any of us on the team, and it's a privilege to be part of this work where women are growing and moving toward goodness, truth, and beauty, and to love the Lord more. It's just such a privilege. So yeah, so the book is the story, and the book contains a lot of parenting stories because when I wrote it, I was in the thick of the parenting years, and so there's a lot of stories about discipline, disasters, really. Uh, but 12 years later, looking back, man, these years go fast. They go so fast, and I'm so grateful to have the relationship I have with my children today, and it's in part through this kind of self-care.
Hmm.
And I'm sure you're a great mom, Valentina, already. You're getting a head start on all this.
Thank you. I'm trying. He's still really little, so I feel like we're still in the easy stage where he just smiles a lot and poops a lot and yeah.
Oh,
But Marcie, this has been very, very just wonderful just to speak to you, hear more about your story, and just to see your passion for reading, but even beyond that, for building community, for bringing women together to grow so that not only they flourish, but their families flourish. So if someone wanted to join a well-read mom group, where would they go, and Oh, also, if you could just talk a little bit about how the group works. I forgot to ask you that earlier.
All right. Okay. So the group just works. We want to make it really easy to start a group to, so you get this, you join as a member, Well-Read Mom, just go online to it, register. We'll send you a leader packet if you're a leader. We'll send you that in the mail. And then you get the companion, and the companion is a wonderful, wonderful resource that has every book listed, why we chose it, kind of the core theme, a bit about the author, a reflection by a member. I don't know about you, but Valentina, I think it's really well done.
Yes.
I'm so proud of all the women who have written to make it such an excellent resource. And the reason we don't want to share all the book list or online and really encourage women to join, and if people need a scholarship, please ask us, because we've so far no woman has ever been turned away, praise God. And we want everyone to have the resources so that it's actually a well-read mom group. Some people say, oh yeah, I have a list, but no, we want to do it. The way we do this is in a certain way in our group, because we encourage one another to read, look at your life. So we're not reading literature to sort of be literary experts and critique the plot and all this. That can happen, and that's good. But we're looking at it to also look at our lives and look at a change that's come about through reading, like you just said with your husband. We're also looking at our lives. So it's a bit different that way. And so the companion, I think, is a beautiful guide in that process, as well as the audio. So you get together in your group, you play the audio, which is usually me for the first one. And then you have your group discussion, and my little audio just really sort of launches us into the group. So you get your tea or glass of wine or whatever, sit down, and then turn on the audio on the laptop or your phone. And it's this little 5-minute thing, but it reminds us why we're there. It reminds us a bit about the story, and kind of just sort of springboards the group into a discussion. That's the purpose of that first one. And then at the end of the meeting, you discuss the book, 45 minutes, an hour. And then at the end of the meeting, you play the next audio, which is usually by Carla Galdo or Colleen Hutt. And that's going to prepare you or whet your appetite for the next book. So, oh, this is what's coming up next. Oh, here's the time setting. Oh, here's the kind of book it is. Okay, I'm kind of nervous to read it, but kind of excited. So that's the purpose. We try and keep the meeting to no more than an hour and 15 minutes. I like to stay on schedule, because I can stay longer and talk to people, but I want women to know I can come and leave. It's really going to be run in a timely way. And so we keep on schedule in my group, and encourage the other groups to do that. And that's how it runs. And you just join online if you want. We'd love to have you. And if you have any questions, just info@Well-Read Mom, and we have a wonderful staff who helps with that.
Awesome. Well, I hope everyone listening joins a group. And like I said, I'm very excited for my first meeting in a couple of weeks. And so I'll definitely, like I said, share this recording with them. And yeah, I will also encourage more friends to join a Well-Read Mom group or start their own. So thank you all for listening. And please, please, please pick up a good book, and with a cup of coffee or a glass of wine, and just enjoy good literature. Feed your soul and just nourish your heart. So thank you all for listening. And remember, when we say yes to God, we change the world. God bless you.